The air in the lawyer's office was thick and stale, smelling heavily of old leather, expensive furniture polish, and the kind of quiet desperation that usually hangs over rooms where fortunes are about to change hands. My mother, Eleanor, sat across from me in a high-backed velvet chair. She wasn't looking at me. She was far too busy fussing with the large diamond brooch pinned to her jacket lapel, a piece my father had bought her for their 30th anniversary just 2 years ago. It caught the light every time she moved, a flashy reminder of the wealth she hadn't earned but loved to spend. My younger brother, Sebastian, sat next to her, slumped low in his seat. He was aggressively scrolling on his phone with a bored, irritated expression, sighing loudly every few seconds. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world, probably at a nightclub or buying expensive sneakers with money he hadn't worked a day for. I sat alone on the other side of the heavy oak desk, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I didn't fidget. I didn't check my watch. I just waited. Mr. Henderson, who had been my father's trusted attorney for over 40 years, cleared his throat nervously. He looked pale and uncomfortable, and his hands were shaking slightly as he held the thick legal document. That was my first real clue that something was wrong. Dad had only been gone for 2 weeks, and while the funeral had been a blur of handshakes, I had been the one keeping the company alive. As I continue, please subscribe, comment, like, and share this video. Shall we begin? Mr. Henderson asked, his voice sounding thin and strained in the quiet room. Eleanor finally looked up from her jewelry. Her eyes were perfectly dry. I realized with a jolt that she hadn't cried a single time since Dad's massive heart attack. Yes, let's get this over with quickly, she said sharply, checking her gold watch. I have a lunch reservation at Le Monde at 1 o'clock, and I cannot be late. A lunch reservation. Her husband of 32 years had built a logistics empire from absolutely nothing, worked himself into an early grave to provide for her, and she was worried about making it to lunch on time. Mr. Henderson sighed and began to read the standard legal jargon that started every will reading. I knew the gist of what was coming, or at least I thought I did. Dad and I had discussed his estate plans extensively years ago. The family house would go to Mom, the stocks and personal savings would be split, but the company, Vanguard Logistics, was supposed to come to me. I was the CEO in all but name. I was the one who modernized our entire tracking system. I was the one who secured the massive government contracts. Sebastian had never spent a single day in the warehouse. He thought logistics was just calling an Uber and waiting. I sat back, ready to sign the papers and get back to work. We had a crisis in the Denver distribution center that needed my attention. But then Mr. Henderson stopped abruptly. He took a long sip of water and looked at me with genuine, deep pity. There is a codicil, he said softly. Dated 3 months ago. A codicil? I asked, keeping my voice calm and steady, though a cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. Dad hadn't mentioned any changes to me, and we told each other everything about the business. Yes, Eleanor interrupted before the lawyer could explain. A small, triumphant smile played on her lips, one she didn't bother to hide. Richard realized recently that the company needed fresh vision. It needed modern leadership to survive in this new world. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth. She wasn't grieving a lost husband, she was gloating over a victory. Mr. Henderson continued reading, his eyes fixed on the paper. I, Richard Sterling, being of sound mind, hereby revoke all previous bequests regarding Vanguard Logistics. I leave 100% of the company shares, voting rights, and physical assets to my wife, Eleanor Sterling, to be distributed or managed as she sees fit. My son, William, is to receive a lump sum of $50,000 as a token of appreciation for his past services to the firm. The room spun slightly. $50,000. The company was valued at over $80 million last quarter. I had built it to that value with my own sweat and blood. I had sacrificed my 20s, my marriage, and my sanity to build that value. And now, I was being bought out for the price of a mid-range sedan. The room went completely silent. The rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to grow deafening, counting down the seconds of my shock. Sebastian finally looked up from his phone, his eyes lighting up for the first time. "Wait, so I get the Porsche, right?" "You said I could have the 911, he asked, ignoring the tension. Eleanor patted his hand gently, like he was a toddler. "We'll discuss the cars later, darling. We have business to finish." She turned her gaze to me. It was cold, hard, and utterly devoid of any motherly affection. "William, I know this is a bit of a shock," she said, her tone sounding like she was scolding a child for spilling milk on a rug. "But your father and I talked extensively before the end. We felt that you were too rigid. You lacked the social grace and the spark to take Vanguard to the next level. We need someone with charisma. Sebastian will be taking over as CEO effective immediately." I looked at Sebastian. The kid who once failed a drug test for a part-time job at a movie theater. The kid who thought profit margins were the white space on the side of a page. "Sebastian," I repeated flatly, staring at him. "He doesn't know a bill of lading from a grocery list. He will destroy the supply chain in a week." Eleanor stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "He will learn. And I will be guiding him every step of the way." I stood up slowly from the chair, smoothing out the front of my suit. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the heavy oak table. I simply buttoned my jacket. "Is that all, Mr. Henderson?" I asked. The lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under his desk and disappear. "Legally, yes. The codicil is valid, William." I tried to advise him against it. I told him it was a mistake. But he was adamant. Or rather, Eleanor was with him in the room, and he seemed very tired. I understood the full picture then. Dad had been sick and weak for months before the end. He was confused on the bad days, relying on her for care. Eleanor must have worked on him, whispered poison in his ear, and played on his fears until he signed whatever she put in front of him just to get some peace. It was manipulation, pure and simple. But proving it would take years of expensive litigation in court, and by then, Sebastian would have driven the company into the ground. "I understand," I said calmly. Eleanor looked disappointed. She wanted a fight. She wanted me to scream and cause a scene so she could call security and play the victim. "You have until the end of the day to clear out your office," she said coldly. "Leave your company phone, keys, and laptop on the desk." "Understood," I said. I turned on my heel and walked out of the office without looking back. I didn't slam the heavy door. I walked calmly through the lobby, past the receptionist who had known me since I was 12 years old, and stepped out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I felt a strange, unexpected sense of clarity washing over me. Most people in my position would be panicking about their future. Most people would be crying or raging. But I wasn't most people. I was a logistics expert. My entire life was about solving complex problems, fixing broken supply chains, and finding the most efficient route from point A to point B. This situation was just another broken system that needed to be routed around. And I knew exactly how to dismantle it. I didn't go back to the office immediately. I went to a quiet coffee shop around the corner, sat down at a small table, and pulled out my personal notebook. I opened it to a fresh page and made a list. It wasn't a list of grievances or emotional complaints. It was a list of assets. Not money, but knowledge. I listed every password, every personal client relationship, every vendor contract nuance, and the unspoken agreements that kept the business running. Eleanor thought she had won the war because she had the title of owner and the physical building. She didn't realize that Vanguard Logistics wasn't a building with trucks parked outside. It wasn't the forklifts or the warehouses. It was the network. It was the trust. And that network lived entirely in my head. I went back to the office at 2 p.m. to pack. Security was already waiting for me at the elevators, two guys I had hired myself 3 years ago. They looked ashamed. "Sorry, Mr. Sterling," one of them said, looking down at his polished boots. "Mrs. Sterling called and said we have to escort you to your office and watch you pack. She said it's protocol." It's okay, Mike, I said gently. You're just doing your job. I don't blame you. I walked to my corner office. Sebastian was already sitting in my leather chair, spinning around in circles like a 5-year-old. Hey, Will, he grinned, feet up on the desk. This view is awesome. Mom says I can redecorate everything. Maybe put a wet bar over there in the corner. I ignored him completely. I packed a small cardboard box, a photo of Dad before he got sick, my college degree, and a few personal books on supply chain management. I left the files. I left the laptop. I left the phone. Good luck, Sebastian, I said as I walked out. You're going to need it. I walked out of the building for the last time, the automatic doors sliding shut behind me with a finality that felt heavy. As I started my car and drove away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from my bank app. The $50,000 transfer had already hit my account. It felt like a slap in the face, a cheap payoff for 15 years of loyalty. But it was also capital. I drove home to my apartment. It was modest, clean, and quiet. I didn't live the flashy, expensive lifestyle my family did. I saved my money. I invested wisely. I was liquid. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my personal laptop, and cracked my knuckles. Eleanor had made one critical, fatal mistake. She assumed that because she owned the company on paper, she owned the relationships that made it work. But in our industry, trust is the only currency that really matters. And nobody trusted Eleanor. She was known as the socialite wife who spent money faster than Dad could make it. And Sebastian? He was a joke in the industry. I drafted an email. Not to the company mailing list, that would be illegal and get me sued. But to my personal contacts. The men and women I played golf with, the ones I sent Christmas cards to, the ones whose kids I helped get internships. The email was short, professional, and precise. Effective today, I am no longer with Vanguard Logistics. I wish the new leadership well in their endeavors. I will be taking some brief time to consider my next venture. If you wish to reach me personally for non-business matters, I can be found at this number. I hit send. Then I waited. It didn't take long. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Marcus, the director of operations for our biggest client, a massive retail chain that accounted for nearly 40% of Vanguard's annual revenue. Will, what is this? Marcus asked, his voice booming. I just got a memo from your mother saying Sebastian is the new CEO? Is this a joke? Tell me this is a prank. No joke, Marcus, I said calmly. It's the new direction the family wants to take. They want fresh vision and modern leadership. Marcus snorted loudly. Fresh vision? The kid asked me last year if our 18-wheeler trucks ran on diesel or regular gas. Will, listen to me. Our contract is up for renewal next month. I can't trust my holiday shipment to a frat boy who doesn't know a pallet from a pallet. I can't advise you on that, Marcus, I said, keeping my voice perfectly neutral. I'm under a strict non-disparagement clause with the estate. Technically, I wasn't because I hadn't signed the exit paperwork yet, but it sounded professional and took the high road. But I can tell you that I'm currently a free agent and looking for opportunities. There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy silence where I could practically hear Marcus thinking. How fast can you set up a new operation? Marcus asked seriously. I smiled for the first time that day. Give me 2 weeks to get the paperwork and insurance sorted. That was how it started. I didn't have trucks. I didn't have warehouses. But I had the one thing that mattered more than hardware. I knew how to move things when nobody else could. I used the $50,000 to incorporate a new LLC the very next morning, Prime Route Solutions. I rented a small shared office space in an industrial park. I leased a high-powered laptop. And I started making calls. I didn't poach Vanguard's employees. I didn't steal their client list. I didn't have to. The logistics industry is small. Word travels faster than a speeding truck on the highway. 3 days later, I got a frantic call from Sarah, Vanguard's lead dispatcher and the woman who practically ran the floor. She was crying. "Mr. Sterling, it's a total disaster over here," she whispered, sounding like she was hiding in a bathroom. "Sebastian fired the entire maintenance crew yesterday because he said they were too expensive and didn't do anything. 2 trucks broke down on the I-95 corridor this morning loaded with perishable goods. The freezers are failing. He's not answering his phone. Eleanor is at a spa in Sedona for the week. Drivers are screaming at me. What do I do?" I felt a sharp pang of sympathy for Sarah. She was a good worker, a single mom who needed this job. "I can't tell you what to do, Sarah," I said gently. "But if you happen to find yourself looking for a new job, Prime Route is hiring as of today. I can't match your current salary just yet, but I can promise you a sane boss who answers the phone. I'll start Monday," she said instantly. "I don't care about the money right now. I can't work for these people. They are going to kill someone." Over the next month, it was a domino effect of incompetence. Vanguard started missing delivery windows left and right. They lost a major shipment of expensive electronics because Sebastian forgot to renew the specific insurance policy on that cargo class. Eleanor was too busy planning her victory gala to notice that the company was bleeding cash at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, I was working 18-hour days. I was the CEO, the dispatcher, the sales team, and the customer service rep. I brokered deals using third-party carriers to move freight. I used my personal reputation to guarantee payments to vendors. Marcus moved his massive retail contract to me before the month was out, just as he promised. "I don't care if you're shipping it on the back of a donkey, Will," he told me as he signed the digital document. "As long as you're the one holding the reins, I'm in." That contract alone gave me enough guaranteed cash flow to lease my first 3 trucks and hire 5 drivers who had just quit Vanguard. 6 months passed, and the landscape had changed completely. Vanguard Logistics was in freefall. I heard the stories through the grapevine and from the drivers who came to my office looking for work. Eleanor had mortgaged the family house to cover payroll because the cash reserves were gone. Sebastian had bought a private company jet with the last of the operational cash, claiming it was necessary for global business development, then immediately flew his friends to Ibiza for a 2-week party. The drivers, the ones who were the backbone of the company, were leaving in droves because their paychecks were bouncing. And where were they coming? To me. They knew I paid on time, every Friday. They knew I respected safety regulations. They knew I knew their names and their families. Prime Route Solutions was growing fast. We weren't huge yet, but we were efficient, lean, and hungry. We were profitable. And we were eating Vanguard's lunch every single day. I hadn't spoken to my mother or brother since that day in the lawyer's office. I didn't need to. Their silence spoke volumes about their panic. Then came the call I had been expecting for weeks. It was Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. "William," he said, and his voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. "Your mother would like to meet with you." "I'm extremely busy, Mr. Henderson," I said, not looking up from the GPS tracking screen on my wall. We had 50 trucks on the road now, covering 3 states. "She says it's urgent. It's about the company. The situation is dire." "I have a company," I said coldly. "And it's doing quite well. I don't have time for social calls." "William, please," Henderson lowered his voice to a whisper. "They are going to file for bankruptcy within the month. The creditors are circling. The bank is calling the loans. She wants to offer you a deal to save it." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. This was it. The moment I had prepared for. "Tell her I can meet her on Tuesday. At my office." "Your office?" he asked, surprised. "Yes. If she wants to talk to me, she comes to my turf. 10 a.m. Don't be late." Eleanor arrived at my office on Tuesday at 10 a.m. sharp. It wasn't a fancy glass tower in the city center. It was a functional, low-slung building in an industrial park, surrounded by the rumble of idling trucks and the smell of diesel. She looked completely out of place in her pristine Chanel suit, stepping gingerly over a puddle in the parking lot. She looked older. The stress was showing through the heavy makeup, and her posture was less regal. Sebastian wasn't with her. "William," she said, sitting down in the simple guest chair across from my metal desk. She didn't look around. She couldn't bear to see that I had built something real without her money. "Mother," I said, not standing up. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Let's not play games," she snapped, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "Vanguard is experiencing a temporary cash flow issue. The market is tough right now." "The market is up 6%, I corrected her immediately. "My business is booming. The market isn't the problem." She flinched. "Yes, well. We are willing to bring you back. Sebastian is overwhelmed. He wants to pursue other interests. We want you to return as CEO." "Return?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "As an employee? You want to hire me back to fix your mess?" "As a partner," she said graciously, as if she were doing me a massive favor. "We will give you 10% of the shares. And a salary increase of 20%. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that made her jump. 10%? "Mom, you own 100% of a sinking ship. 10% of zero is zero." Her eyes narrowed, the old anger flaring up. "You ungrateful child. We are offering you your father's legacy. You should be thanking me." "You stole my father's legacy," I said, my voice dropping an octave, deadly serious. "You manipulated a dying man to cut out the only person who knew how to run his business. You gave it to a boy who spent the operating budget on a jet and parties. And now that you've run it into the ground, you want me to come fix it for a fraction of what I deserve?" "What do you want?" she hissed, gripping her purse. 50%? Is that what it will take?" "I don't want Vanguard," I said clearly. "The brand is toxic. The reputation is ruined. The equipment is in disrepair. Nobody trusts the name anymore." I slid a blue folder across the desk toward her. "I want the assets. The routes. The warehouse leases. And the trucks that still run." She looked at the folder as if it were a bomb. "You want to buy us out?" "I am offering to buy the assets," I said. "For the debt." "What?" She looked pale, her hand going to her throat. "I will assume the company's outstanding debts to the bank. In exchange, you sign over all physical assets to Prime Route Solutions. You walk away with nothing, but you also walk away without declaring bankruptcy. You get to keep the house. If you can pay the mortgage on your own." "That's robbery," she screamed, standing up. "That's business," I said, remaining seated. "You wanted me to learn about real loss? You taught me that family doesn't matter when money is involved. I learned the lesson well. Take the deal or go bankrupt." She stormed out of my office, slamming the door so hard the framed licenses on the wall shook. I knew she wouldn't sign. Not yet. She still had her pride, and she still thought she could maneuver her way out of this. But pride doesn't pay the electric bill. 2 weeks later, the bank seized the company jet right off the tarmac. A week after that, the power was cut at the Vanguard headquarters for non-payment. The drivers who were still there parked their trucks where they stood and walked off the job. My phone rang again late one night. It wasn't Eleanor. It was Sebastian. "Bro, you gotta help me," he sounded panicked, hyperventilating. "They're talking about fraud. Mom used the employee pension fund to pay the vendors to keep the lights on. I signed the checks. I didn't know. She told me to sign them, said it was a temporary loan." I closed my eyes and rubbed my temples. I knew Sebastian was useless, but I didn't think he was malicious. Eleanor, on the other hand, was capable of anything to save face. "Listen to me, Sebastian," I said. Get a lawyer. A criminal lawyer. Not Henderson. And don't sign anything else Mom gives you. 19. The end came quickly after that call. The investigation into the pension fund spooked the remaining creditors, and they moved to liquidate Vanguard immediately. Eleanor had no choice left. She came back to my office 3 days later. She was trembling. She looked broken, small, and defeated. Sign the papers, she whispered, pushing the document across my desk. Please. Just take the debt. Keep Sebastian out of jail. I can't let him go to prison. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had looked me in the eye 6 months ago and told me I wasn't good enough. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt tired. I'll take the assets, I said softly. And I'll cover the pension shortfall out of my own pocket. I won't let Dad's employees lose their retirement because of you. Her shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you, she choked out. I'm not doing it for you, I said coldly. I'm doing it for them. And for Dad's name. Now get out of my office. I signed the deal that afternoon. Prime Route Solutions absorbed what was left of the carcass of Vanguard Logistics. I spent the next year cleaning up the massive mess they had created. I sold the bad trucks for scrap, renegotiated the expensive warehouse leases, and made sure every single employee who had lost their pension was made whole. It cost me millions of my own profit, setting my growth back by 2 years, but it was worth it. We rebranded everything immediately. The name Vanguard was erased from the side of every truck, painted over with the Prime Route logo. As for Eleanor, she lost the big house anyway. The bank took it to cover her personal debts. She moved into a small condo in a different, less expensive part of town. She had her Social Security and a small allowance I gave her. Not because she deserved it, but because I wasn't her. I wouldn't let her starve. But I didn't visit. I didn't call. Sebastian actually surprised me in the aftermath. After the fraud scare, which went away once I replenished the pension funds, he got scared straight. He realized he wasn't a businessman and never would be. He came to me a year later, looking humble, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. I'm sorry, Will, he said, looking at the floor. I was an idiot. I ruined everything. Yes, you were, I agreed. But you're young. You can fix it. I want to work, he said. Really work. I don't expect a desk job. I just want a chance. I looked at him, assessing him like I would a new hire. We need guys on the loading dock for the night shift. It starts at 4 a.m. It's hard physical labor. Minimum wage to start. He nodded firmly. I'll take it. And he did. He worked his way up from the bottom. He wasn't a CEO, but after 2 years, he became a decent shift manager. He learned the value of $1 the hard way, sweating for it. 3 years later, Prime Route Solutions was double the size Vanguard had ever been at its peak. We were the premier logistics carrier in the state, with contracts expanding across the country. I was sitting in my office, the same one in the industrial park, though we had expanded the building to take over the whole block, when I got a letter in the mail. It was from Eleanor. The handwriting was shaky. Dear William, I watch the trucks go by on the highway sometimes. I see your logo everywhere. I realize now that the charisma I thought you lacked was actually integrity. I mistook flash for substance. And integrity is what builds an empire. I am sorry for what I did. I read the letter twice, feeling the weight of the paper. I folded it carefully and put it in my bottom drawer. I didn't reply. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But I had built new ones that were stronger. I drove out to the cemetery that weekend to visit Dad. I stood by his grave, the grass freshly cut. It was a quiet day, wind rustling the big oak trees. I fixed it, Dad, I said softly to the stone. It's not the same name. It's not Vanguard anymore. But it's the same values. The people are taken care of. The job is getting done right. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I had lost the inheritance, yes. I had lost the easy path and the $80 million head start. But I had gained something much more valuable. I knew exactly who I was. I was the man who could lose everything and build it back better from scratch. I was the man who didn't need a handout to succeed. People ask me sometimes how I did it. How I didn't let the anger consume me when my own family betrayed me. The truth is, anger is inefficient. It's wasted energy that doesn't move the shipment forward. Revenge isn't about hurting the other person or making them suffer. It's about succeeding so completely that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. Eleanor tried to cut me off from the family wealth, thinking that money was the source of power. She didn't understand that for a man like me, the power isn't in the checkbook. It's in the capability. She took the money, but she couldn't take the skill. And in the end, the skill took the money back. So, if you're going through something like this, if someone has taken credit for your work, or cut you out, or betrayed you, don't scream. Don't fight them on their terms. Step back. Look at what you have that they can't take. Your mind. Your work ethic. Your integrity. Take those things and build your own castle. Let them keep the ruins of the old one. Because the best revenge isn't watching them fail. It's reaching a height where you can't even see them anymore. That is what real loss feels like for them. Becoming invisible to the person they tried to destroy. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, share this video, and activate the notification bell for more interesting videos.